Hey book besties, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Amanda. I obviously love to read. Today we're going to be going through my March wrap up. It's been so long since I've just been able to do a normal wrap up. If you've not seen my last wrap up, I had to go through December, January, and February because I went home for the holidays, had to stay there for a while to help my dad get through a surgery, and wasn't able to post content, basically, so there was no reason to film. So this is my first time in a while being able to just do a 1 month wrap up, and I cannot wait to tell you guys about the 17 books that I read this month. As usual, I have my handy dandy notes here of all of my reviews from the month because 17 books is a lot of books to keep track of, y'all. And I just have a really horrible memory. I know there's a lot of us out there, and it's not necessarily because we're reading books so quickly or we're consuming so many books. I'm sure it would help if we didn't, but I just have a terrible memory. As soon as I read something, it leaves my brain. As soon as I watch a show, a movie, it leaves my brain. What can you do? Anyways, let's get into what I read this month. Starting off, the first book that I read this month was actually a novella. It was about 138 pages, and this was First Tilt by Lucien Burr. So this was a really interesting one. This one I rated 3.5 stars. I read this purely off of recommendation by Emmy as well as Laura, because Emmy read it because of Laura. But this basically follows 3 POVs of 3 males who are in assumingly medieval times, because one of them is a knight, there's jousting, it's a fun time. And it isn't an MMM in this particular novella. However, I believe it's pretty obvious when you read it that it's going to turn into MMM probably when the official series starts, because technically this is a prequel to the full-blown series that comes out later this year. Basically, the dynamic of what's going on in this story is you have Hal, who is a commoner turned knight, and he's gotten to become a knight because of his skills in jousting. So he's basically fighting practically every single day, and he's undefeated. Then you have Alaric. Alaric is a nobleman who comes in and basically says, I want to challenge the best person here at jousting. And they tell them it's Hal, he's undefeated, like, you're not gonna win, there's no point in you even trying. And he's like, no, I'm gonna beat him, you don't understand. Then they end up jousting against each other, some things happen, there's some very obvious, hateful, spiteful chemistry between them, and then the third person who kind of enters the situation is Perrin, which is Hal's squire. Super fun dynamic, loved it. Wasn't as good as I was kind of hoping it to be honest, but this is definitely piqued my interest as well, and I'm very excited for when the full lengths come out at some point. Second book I read this month is Problematic Summer Romance by Hazelwood. Maybe it was in my last wrap-up video. I mentioned that I started reading this in February but didn't finish it yet. I predicted it to be 6 stars, and it indeed was 6 stars. This book, Hazelwood is literally a godsend. She just, every single book I've ever read by hers, every single thing I've ever read by hers, because she does have quite a few novellas, they're all bangers. They're literally all bangers, and this was no different. This story follows Maya, who is, I believe, like 23, and she is a scientific major who... It starts off with her in present day, where she is in Sicily for the week because her older brother from Not in Love is getting married. Her brother has a business partner and best friend named Connor. I believe his full name is Connor Harkness, so they also refer to him as Hark. He is 38. So 15 years her senior, and they have a very complicated, tumultuous relationship that spans over quite a few years. So this is kind of like that second chance, but they never really got to get started in the first place, you know? Obviously, age gap. The pining and the tension in this book, chef's fucking kiss, it's absolutely unbeatable. It's unbeatable. The next book that I finished in March was Wild and Wrangled by Lyla Sage. Lots of tabs in this one as well. This was the end of Rebel Blue Ranch. It made me so sad. to leave this world. However, I tabbed something in the author's note because Lyla Sage said herself, and who knows, maybe I'll meet you at the Rebel Blue Ranch headgate again someday, because nothing lasts forever, you know, not even goodbyes. I'm not gonna cry. God damn it. The series makes me so emotional. But this was the last one. I didn't like it as much as the rest of the series. However, I did feel like it was a very nice wrap up to the series. I did end up rating it 4 stars. I think every other one in the series was 4.5 stars, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not that it was bad by any means. It just wasn't as good as the other 3 books. Okay. This one follows Cam and Dusty. Cam is Gus's baby mama, as well as Riley's mom. It is also a second chance romance with her and Dusty, who is someone that she used to know in high school. Again, with these kind of contemporary romances, there's not a whole lot of plot that I can really tell you, aside from it's obviously their romance, and it was adorable. I did love that. That was probably a spoiler. Anyways, the next thing that I read this month is called It's Different This Time by Joss Richard. I rated this 3.5 stars. I think my expectations for this book were a little higher than they should have been. The reviews and the people that I know on Fable or on other social media who've read this book rave about it. I don't really know why. It was okay. It was good. I struggle to say good. It was good-ish, but I did rate it 3.5 stars. So the story follows June and Adam. He lives in California, but she gets an email one day randomly asking her to come back to New York because there's something important that needs to be discussed with her and can only be discussed in person. Super sus. She goes along with it anyway just to find out what's going on. And it ends up being a situation where her previous landlord from when she used to live in this brownstone in New York City, he passed away semi-recently. And in his will and estate, he left the brownstone to the last known tenants, which happened to be June and Adam. Now, June and Adam haven't lived here for, I think, about 6 years. They've not spoken to each other in about 6 years. And again, you do get this past and present timeline of what happened back then, what's going on now. They basically end up having to live together for a few weeks in this brownstone, and they have to work through their previous issues. Like I said, it was cute. It was well written, but it definitely fell flat in a lot of areas. Not my favorite, but it was okay. Next, I read Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This I rated 4 stars and was my first Kennedy Ryan book, and definitely will not be my last. This really hooked me into Kennedy Ryan's writing style. She is very well known for writing extremely emotional romances, and that's exactly what I got from this story. Unfortunately for me, and the rating-ish, kind of how I was feeling about it, this was my third, or I actually think it was 4th. This was my 4th second chance romance book basically in a row, because Problematic Summer Romance was second chance, Wild and Wrangled was second chance, and It's Different This Time was second chance. And so was Before I Let Go. After I got through with this book, I was like, holy shit, I am really burnt out on this trope, and I can't do it anymore for quite some time. But I did really enjoy this book. This book follows Yasmin and Josiah, who I believe are in their mid to late 30s. I don't know that it's really ever mentioned, but they used to be married. They are currently divorced. They live like down the street from each other, and they're also raising 2 kids, and they have a business together. So their lives are still very intertwined, even though they are divorced. It's their second chance romance. There's not really a whole lot more I can really say about this. I will say definitely read the trigger warnings for this book. When people say Kennedy Ryan's books are emotional, they're emotional in a way I've not read in a book yet. The way that the emotions in this book were written were so visceral. I literally felt like I was a part of this couple trying to work through their issues and find a way to get back together. It's gonna make me emotional. They went through a lot. And I know a lot of people don't like second chance romance, because especially when they're divorcees, because you're like, they went through that whole process. They obviously had a reason for that. They shouldn't be together, just move on. But there are things that happen in life that cause people to act a little differently than they might typically. And that sometimes leads to lashing out at people, breaking a relationship off with people, even though that's not really what you want. You feel like that's what you need at the time. Anyway, this book deals with a lot of grief. So please make sure to check check your trigger warnings. It is a very good book if you're looking for something very emotional. Kennedy Ryan is where it's at. Now, after all this second chance, and especially after how emotionally demanding that last book was, I went into something super random, just kind of throwing a shot in the dark? Is that what we're... Okay. Anyways, you know what I'm trying to say. I was like throwing things at the wall to see what would stick because I kind of felt a little slumpy after that. So I was just kind of trying to try something new. I became friends with this girl on Instagram who loves Penelope Douglas, and she's been trying to convince me to read Penelope Douglas, and I decided to finally give it a shot. I do own 2 Penelope Douglas books. I did not read those. I decided to start with probably her most controversial book, which is Credence. I unfortunately did not DNF this book. I wish I would have DNF'd it. If you don't know anything about this book, the number one thing that you will probably learn if you decide to look into it is this. This story is taboo because the female main character is not only freshly 18, but the multiple male main characters who end up being in the story are her step-uncle and 2 step-cousins. Yeah, if you're not new here, you'll probably know I don't have a lot of triggers, and there's not a lot of things that are weird to me or that I wouldn't read because of the situation, whatever. Especially when the characters have no blood relation whatsoever, which these characters do not. It's literally her dad's stepbrother and then his 2 kids. I will go ahead and say this real quick because this was something that I was a little worried about, so it is kind of a spoiler, but I'm sure it's probably something that you want to know if you're maybe thinking about this. The stepdad and the kids, they never mingle together. There's never a situation where the dad and the kids are together with the girl. So there's that. They do things separately with her. Again, check your triggers. It's not a very dark book, but it is dark in some aspects. There is sexual assault in this book and sexual assault adjacent things happening in this book, so definitely read your triggers. I did rate this 2 stars because, again, I wish I would have DNF'd it. It kept me entertained enough, I guess, to finish it, but I did not enjoy it whatsoever. The crazy thing is that the taboo nature of the book was the least bad thing about this book. It was just the rest of it. The writing wasn't my favorite. A lot of it just didn't feel like it made a lot of sense. When the FMC is freshly 18, it's gotta be like one of my least favorite things in a book ever. I absolutely fucking hate that shit. There's just no reason for them to be so young and to be doing things on page. It's just a lot and I didn't love it. I'm gonna move on. After that, I really needed to get away from romance because it was a heavy romance month at the beginning of the month, and I was just kind of over it. So after that, I jumped into The Naturals, book number 1 by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I did rate this 3 stars. Again, I think my expectations were a little higher than they should have been for this particular book. I do own the entire series, so I was really hoping to love it. One of my friends on Fable almost a year ago basically sold me on this series because she knows about my love of Criminal Minds and basically said, if you love Criminal Minds, you would love this series. And she's not wrong. This is very, very Criminal Minds vibes, which I did love that aspect of it. However, it was written very juvenile. I mean, the characters are like 17, but it's just written on like the lower end of YA, which is not my favorite. I do love YA, but I love when it's upper YA, or the characters happen to be young, but the writing style is still very adult. You know what I mean? And this was not. This was like very YA. That did make it extremely easy to read. I read it very quickly. It was very engaging. I did intend to continue the series right after that. However, I did not check ahead of time if the other books were going to be available immediately with my library, the audiobooks, and they weren't. They had quite a long wait, actually, and I'm still waiting on book 2, so we moved on. After that, I went back to romance for just a split second. I went back to romance for just a split second, and I tried reading an indie book that I heard about like probably at least 6+ months ago. I asked on Fable around that time if anybody could recommend any additional books that had chef smut in them, because I loved the chef smut in Butcher and Blackbird so much that I needed more of it. And one of the girlies recommended to me a book called On the Line by Naomi Loud. From the premise seemed to me like it might be fan fiction of the show The Bear. If you've ever seen it, you know you know. And I love that show because I love chefs. I was really excited. And I did end up DNFing it, unfortunately, around the 40% mark. There were some red flags before the 40%. I just didn't like the things that were happening in the book. There was nothing keeping me interested or invested in the story or the characters. And then around the 40% mark, things went from weird to what the fuck is going on here? And I just simply could not do it anymore. So I DNF'd it. After that, to keep me from getting into a book slump, I totally switched gears and started reading the Hunger Games series. So I did read The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, as well as Mockingjay. I did unfortunately DNF The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is book 4 in the Hunger Games series. It's not part of the original trilogy, but it did come in this box set. I was intending to read it, I just didn't like it. After reading about Katniss in first person, it was really hard to switch to third person from President Snow point of view. Maybe I'll read it someday, but it's just really not in the cards for me. To go through them individually, I rated The Hunger Games book 1 a 4-star, Catching Fire 5 stars, and Mockingjay 3.5 stars. If for some reason you have absolutely no idea what The Hunger Games is about, it's about a 16-year-old girl named Katniss who lives in a dystopian world where there are 12 districts. And each district is in charge of doing something specific for their world. Like one is for agriculture, one is for textiles, so on and so forth. Katniss lives in District 12, which is kind of like the most neglected district. Everybody is always hungry, everybody is poor. In their world, annually, there is something called the Hunger Games, which is a set of trials where there are 24 children chosen. They have to be between the ages of 12 and 18, but basically a boy and a girl are chosen from each district, equaling 24 kids who literally go into a game of survival. And literally only one of them gets to live at the end of it. Katniss's younger sister gets chosen. However, Katniss, being Katniss, decides to volunteer in her place and she ends up in the Hunger Games. And it just kind of goes from there. It's extremely high stakes. It's extremely easy to read, but not in a lower YA kind of a way. This is exactly how I was hoping The Naturals was written, and it was not. But Suzanne Collins really surprised me. Her writing is amazing. And I do plan on reading Sunrise on the Reaping, especially because the movie comes out later this year, but I do want to watch the movies for the other Hunger Games books first. Moving on to book 13 that I read in the month of March, I read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is one of my 26 and 26 books that I wanted to read for the year, which, by the way, I'm gonna just tell y'all this here because I'm probably gonna end up redoing it, but I was thinking about my list of 26 and 26 recently, and I realized that practically every single thing I put on that list is a series. And some of them are really long series, and I can't quite have things like Zodiac Academy on my 26 and 26 while also having a goal of, if I start reading a series, to finish it, because Zodiac Academy is like 12 books deep and it's just not possible. I think I might redo my 26 and 26 list. I guess let me know in the comments if you guys would be interested in that. If not, fuck me, I guess it doesn't really matter, but I've just been thinking about how unrealistic that list is. And whether you guys want me to or not, I will redo the list. It's just a matter of, do you want me to film it and tell you what I'm changing, why I'm changing it, so on and so forth. Anyways, this was on that list because I did want to read this series from Abby Jimenez, because if you don't know, I did read Yours Truly last year, which is the second book in this series. This one's the first one, and I didn't know that when I read it. They're interconnected, so it's not a huge deal, but I love reading series in order, no matter if they are interconnected standalones or obviously a regular series. I did read this. Shock, surprise, I rated it 5 stars. This book was absolutely incredible. In true Abby Jimenez fashion, I was laughing one page, sobbing the next page. My heart was with these characters immediately, and I ate it up. This story follows Alexis and Daniel. This is also kind of an age gap. So she is 37 and he is only 28. So it's a reverse age gap, which I thought was interesting. However, it's not like a main part of the conflict. I don't even think it's ever even really mentioned besides at the beginning where she's like, oh my God, he's so young. I can't have sex with him. He's so young, whatever. But it's not a major part of the story. But Alexis is an ER doctor and she is like part of a royal family of doctors. She works for Ryum and at least one person in her family has been working there for like well over 100, almost 200 years. Her brother recently ran off to Cambodia and got married and basically fucked off away from their family. So she's the last standing person in their family to continue working for Ryum. She feels immense pressure to stay there, even though her ex-boyfriend is another, I believe he's a surgeon who works at the hospital. And they have to see each other constantly. There's a big conflict there because they're having some problems. Anyways, I'm getting so off the fucking point. When the book starts, she's going to a funeral of another family member, and on her way home, she ends up stopping in a really small town where Daniel lives. She ends up getting caught? She ends up swerving off the road to avoid hitting an animal and ends up in a ditch. The person that she calls to tow her is kind of a no-show. And then Daniel shows up. He's an awesome guy. He says, you know, I'll go ahead and tow you. Not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. So he does that. They go on about their separate ways and then they end up running into each other at the local bar. Long story short, they end up having a one-night stand and then she flees the next morning and is like, no, this can never happen again. However, she can't stop thinking about him. He can't stop thinking about her. They continue what they're doing and it becomes their romance. It was absolutely adorable. Pretty much for the last 100 pages I was crying, which is exactly what happened with yours truly as well as Say You'll Remember Me. So seems to kind of be a trend. Book number 14 that I read in March was The Right Move by Liz Tomforty. This is book 2 in the Windy City series. So I did read Mile High last year, absolutely loved it. However, for some reason, did not continue the series. I have been seeing so many people talk about this series on Fable recently. Even though it was popular last year, it's getting even more popular this year. And I have a couple of really good friends on Fable who this series is like their comfort read, and they both were reading it all over again in preparation of In Her League, which is Liz Tomforty's most recent release that came out last month or sometime recently. Yeah, I just kind of felt the FOMO, so I decided to pick it up. Unfortunately, this book, again, I think my expectations were just a little bit too high. I did end up rating it 3.5 stars. Now, before you come at me, Mr. Ryan Shea lived up to the expectations. He's amazing. However, I'm not gonna lie. Before this, I've never experienced a male main character where I was actually like, you're doing too much. It's unbelievable that any person would be going out of their way to do the things that Ryan was doing for her. That kind of affected my rating. It also was just kind of a mood situation for me. But yeah, I really felt like I was kind of teetering on the edge of a reading slump again while reading this book. If you don't know what this book is about, it is about Ryan Shea, who is a basketball player for the NBA, and he is the twin brother of Stevie from book 1, Mile High. And it also follows Indy, which is Stevie's best friend. So at the beginning of the story, Indy, who previously was a flight attendant, gets a job on land. However, she doesn't have anywhere to live. Stevie has this brilliant idea like, why don't you move in with my brother? He's always on the road, so he's hardly ever home. He's a millionaire, so he's got this gigantic apartment all to himself, plenty of room for you. Just do it. And she's like, absolutely not. And Ryan is like, absolutely not. Obviously, it does end up happening for reasons, and they go from hating each other to not hating each other. It's adorable. I do love the things that happened in this book. It just, I don't know, maybe it was just a mood thing. It just didn't hit as hard as I thought it was going to. I think I'm going to talk about this in an upcoming vlog that I'm going to post, but for some reason it was taking me a really long time to read this book. And anytime a book takes longer than 2 days for me to read, my brain starts going, why is this taking so long? Do we not like this book? What's wrong? And it just kind of sours the whole situation. So that is part of what happened here. Book 15 that I read this month was a brand new release. This was The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez, which just came out last Tuesday. And I didn't order the book because it only got released in hardcover. and they're down here. I don't know if you can see that. All of the rest of my Abby Jimenez collection is paperback. So yeah, sorry, publishing industry. I'm not buying a hardcover romance novel unless I absolutely have to. I'll be waiting for the paperback, and honestly, I probably won't be buying the paperback. Not gonna lie. I did pre-order the audiobook, so I did start listening to it the day that it came out. Finished it in 2 days, but I did rate it 2 stars. I'm gonna briefly talk about what this story is about like I usually do, but I will say I'm gonna put something at the end of this video that goes over the spoilers in case you want to see that and you want to chat about it, because I have a lot of feelings about this book. This book follows Larissa. Larissa has had kind of a hard life. She's grown up with an alcoholic father who left, her mom who's also kind of not around. They grew up very poor. Her mom is constantly relying on unreliable men to kind of save them from their situation, which never works out. Her dad, at the beginning of the story, basically puts her into a shit ton of debt, and she ends up having to work as a server to try and recoup some of that money. I think at the beginning of the story, she's already dating Mike. If not, it happens very quickly at the beginning of the story. Basically, she starts dating this guy named Mike. He's a depressed person who's no longer on his meds and is basically a closeted alcoholic. He has a best friend named Chris. Towards the beginning of the story, Larissa needs to take her mom to the hospital because her mom is having surgery. Mike is supposed to take them. However, the night before that, he has a bender, drinks a whole lot, wakes up the next morning with a hangover, calls Chris and says, "Hey man, I have a migraine. Will you go pick up my girlfriend and her mom and take her to the hospital?" So he does, and that's how Larissa and Chris become friends, and they essentially spend the next few months building up the most adorable friendship in the world. It is very innocent. I think given what you already know, you can probably tell kind of where this story ends up going. It was not my favorite. 2 stars, I think, even feels generous. So anyways, moving into book 16 that I read this month, I read The Dark Lord's Guide to Dating and Other War Crimes by Tiffany Hunt. This one was interesting. I did rate it 3 stars, and that is simply because it was way too long. This book was over 600 pages. This story follows Casimir, who is the Dark Lord in his realm, and he basically needs to find someone who has a really specific bloodline to marry so that he can combine his magic with theirs to make this artifact thingy work properly and basically take over. So he does end up finding this in Arabella. Arabella is a princess who does contain this bloodline that he's looking for. So he kidnaps her, forces her to marry him, and it goes from there. So this is definitely like an enemies to lovers situation. The tension, the banter in this is damn near unbeatable. However, like I said, it was way too long for what it was. There was a huge chunk of this book that was very boring because of it just being way too drawn out. It was cute, but yeah, 3 stars. Last book that I read this month was a 50-page novella by Catherine Center named Everybody's Favorite Guy, which I rated 4 stars. Guys, tell me how Catherine Center made me sob in 50 pages. That is pure magic. This story follows Lily, who at the beginning of the story, she is embarking on a trip with her mom and her mom's best friend to scatter the ashes of Lily's dad, as well as her mom's best friend's late husband. Now, what she doesn't know going into this trip is that her ex-best friend from high school, his name is Walker Shaw, that he is also going along on this trip. Nobody told her. She's very taken by surprise. When they get where they're going, they end up getting stranded in a cabin, just the 2 of them. So they're like snowed in, no power at this cabin. You know how that goes. It is a second chance romance, so they do have a reason for not having spoken since high school. They have to work through that issue, and then they live happily ever after. Now, the reason why this was so emotional for me, well, I can't really explain like why. I connected to the characters so much. And at the very end, I'm gonna read you a quote that will definitely probably make you want to read this book. It hit me in the chest. If you don't want to hear this, skip forward. Lily's talking about her dad. She said, "I used to wonder if maybe he loved us too well, if we'd been spoiled by all his warmth and goofiness, but I'm not sure you can be spoiled by love." I once read that grief is biological, that each person you love has a set of neurons in your brain tasked with keeping track of that person. When that person dies and that person is gone, those neurons don't know what to do. They keep searching and searching for their person, even after there's no one to find. Eventually, the neurons themselves die out. That's what grieving is, the letting go of people we lost and the parts of ourselves that try to hold on. And our only consolation is love. Diving back in, finding more people, growing new neurons, fearlessly, stubbornly, insistently choosing love over and over. Damn the consequences. I can't even see the quote anymore. I felt so grateful to my dad. He hadn't spoiled us. I suddenly knew for certain. He just loved us so well it made it worth losing him. Okay. Time to wrap up this video. If you've stuck around for this entire video, thank you so much for spending your time with me. I appreciate you guys so much. Please leave any comments or thoughts down below. I would love to hear what you read this month. What were some of your favorites from this month? Some of your disappointments? Let me know all the things down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! To get to the spoilers about The Night We Met, like I said, I have so many feelings about this, but I'm really gonna try and be concise about it. I went into this book knowing nothing. I didn't read the blurb. I didn't listen to the trigger warnings because I'm not usually triggered by things. However, this book was horrifically triggering for me. I have multiple people in my family who have struggled with alcoholism, and alcoholism is the main theme in this book, along with tropes of best friend's girlfriend. There is no actual cheating that happens in this book. However, there's a lot of people who feel that there was emotional cheating that was going on. I kind of disagree because there was never really a moment where the two main characters kissed or thought about being together really, or anything like that. Larissa was constantly asking herself, why am I with Mike? So it was really towing the line of emotional cheating. That part didn't necessarily bother me. What did bother me is how amazing Chris was, and him and his friend group were so close. They've been close for 25 years, yet Chris never had the balls to confront his best friend about his blatant alcoholism and how awful and how detrimental it was to his life. Alternatively, the fact that Mike never talked to Chris about his mom's death, part of me is like, well, she's trying to be really realistic, and that's really fucking realistic, that a group of dudes would not communicate about this kind of stuff. However, this is fiction. We don't need things to be this realistic. This was like a real life relationship struggling to get away from where it was to where it should be, and it was literally worse than watching a train wreck happen. It was so emotional in the worst way. If it wasn't Abby Jimenez, I would have DNF'd it because my mental health could not take this book. Between the alcoholism, the potential cheating, the fact that Larissa was with Mike for over 80% of this book was actually ridiculous. Yeah, I really, really did not like anything about this book. However, I will say, in true Abby fashion, it was written very well. Abby did try to go about writing the story the best way that she could. I just think that it's too messy of a story for the majority of people to enjoy it. Being someone who's in the mainstream contemporary romance space, I'm not saying that they always need to write for their fans or, you know, for the readers, but there's certain stories that just don't need to be told. And I think, in my opinion, this was a story that did not need to be told. If you want to chat more about this, DM me on Instagram. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to put your thoughts in the comments, I would love to talk to you there as well. I have been getting a ton of responses on my review on Fable of people saying, really glad I'm not alone in feeling this way about this book. I was really looking forward to it. I love Abby Jimenez, yada, yada, yada. So I know I'm not alone in feeling this way. And I will say it does absolutely suck. It broke my fucking heart to rate an Abby Jimenez less than 5 stars, not to mention it be 2 stars. So